I realized I'm not a narcissist. Believe it or not, it's something I worry about, you know? Especially meeting new people. I get bored a lot. I get bored in these conversations, and boredom always strikes me as a dark triad trait. It's extractive. Other people are my little playthings. It's like I'm waiting for an opening, and I'll just say something that throws the whole conversation to chaos. For example, a couple months ago, I sat down with a group of women. I was supposed to be there. I sat down with a group of women who were complaining about men. And I was like, are you guys complaining about men? And they were like, oh, yes. Like, is that, we don't have to, like, is that, and I was like, no, go ahead. And I was like, what do you not like about men? And they were like, they're aggressive, and they're obstinate, they're arrogant, they don't listen, they think they're always right. I was like, that's true. Those are all true. And then one of them was like, are you being like sarcastic? Like, are you rage baiting us? And I was like, no. And she was like, have you always been a man? And I was like, I'm sorry, are you asking if I'm trans? And she was like, yes. And I was like, you're saying that the only possible way that I could be open to hearing you say negative things about men is if I secretly am not a man, or I'm tricking you? And she was like, kind of. And so then she was like, well, what are your criticisms of women? Another one was like, well, you don't have to answer that. I want to put you on the spot. And I was like, oh, no. It's no problem. Basically, it's the flip side of what you're complaining about men. I think you're too accommodating. You walk on eggshells, you tiptoe around men, you coddle them, you make yourself smaller to make other people feel more comfortable. And then one of them was like, well, as a woman, just walking down the street, if I walk by a man, I feel unsafe. So we have to walk on eggshells. And I was like, okay, why don't you just buy a gun? The first one was like, well, don't you think that's a little extreme? Would you want to try something else like mace or like a taser? See, this is what I'm talking about, is that you men always go straight to like shooting people. And I was like, I'm not telling you to shoot random people. I'm telling you, if you are afraid for your safety, just arm yourself. When faced with the prospect of physically empowering yourself and not being afraid anymore, you just launch into this like confused rationalization state where it uses like completely deconstruct the entire conversation so we don't even know what we're talking about anymore. Like that men don't think this way for the most part. If you're scared, make it so you're not scared. That's why I'm there. This is like the moment I live for. I spent my whole life waiting for a woman to ask me to criticize women. And it was like, it finally is happening. But then for them, they're like, oh, let's go back to talking about like traffic, or like, they're always talking about like their houses. So I've started thinking of myself as like a psychopath. Because I'm like, am I just looking for a wound to pour salt in? Another person there told us about I don't want to go into any details, essentially getting like very, very sick. But it's like the most honest thing anybody has said. I'm like, happy. I'm like, thank God someone's dying so we can like emotionally connect with each other. As my relationship with my family was falling apart, I started complaining more and more about how like we are not able to process conflict or talk about anything real that is actually happening. And rather than being interpreted as me saying like you're shutting me down every time I express a negative emotion, this got interpreted as me saying you guys are boring. So then there's part of me that's like, Max is a malignant narcissist who just thinks everybody's boring and just hurts people for fun. And I don't know. There's like a kid in this room. He can hear everything I'm saying. So now when I'm talking to these people, I have this running inner commentary about whether I'm a narcissist. And that at least is interesting. Holy shit. They said they didn't have any sugar, and the guy was like, you want me to put simple syrup in your tea? This is the sweetest tea I've ever had. God. Ooh, that's good. Then I had a realization at one of these events, I was looking at this guy, and I couldn't hear what he was saying. I think I talked to him really briefly. I don't know him. I'm just looking at him, and he's just got this like facial expression that sometimes like corporate women have it, but usually it's just men, not just men. All men are just like, I don't know how to. It's this face of like, I know what I'm saying. I'm telling you. I think this is like content creators usually have this kind of like when someone else is talking, the man's like It's like you haven't processed what the other person's saying yet, but you already have decided that it's going to swing into like, oh yes, of course, yes, I know everything. And I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, that's what I hate. That is the source of my boredom. And I started thinking about like scenes in movies. In every scene in a good movie, something changes. The characters change. The protagonist has to protagonate. And I'm not saying that every conversation has to be some like total implosion of your self-concept when you're talking to me. I'm saying that you have to at least be open to it. Or it's too boring. It's like non-interactive. It's like vacation pictures. This is why vacation pictures are the most boring thing on earth. Because the person already has a super vested, fragile interest in this narrative that they spent time with their family, and people are also super fragilistic about their families and about vacations. Like, I spent a bunch of money to spend time around the people who I question my relationships with the least. And so I'm going to tell you what happened. Everybody's smiling in every picture. Also, anybody who's ever been on a vacation with their family knows that it's a fucking horrible experience. So you have to sit there looking at fabricated evidence of a lie that you know the person, so you know it's a lie, and you know how it's a lie, and you're forced socially. You're not forced because you're weak. You sit there and you affirm their narrative about themselves. It is brutally uninteresting. If someone was like, I want you to look at these pictures of me and my wife on this trip, and I want you to tell me, do you think she's attracted to me? You'd be like, yes, I do want to do that. Give me the pictures right now. Absolutely. Oh yeah. Or like, do you think my kid is gay? Yeah, give me the pictures. That would be great. I would love to do that. But instead they're like, I want you to look at these pictures and agree with me that my son isn't gay and my wife loves me. And it's like, what does that have? What does that have to do with me? All this is it's an erasure of myself. You just want me to be invisible. You want me to be a mirror, not a mirror. You want me to be nothing. You want me to be you. It's horrible. So this is why I prefer talking to women. Not because they have more of a stomach for being, I guess because they just have less of a self-concept. They have less of a self. They know they don't know what's going on. They're relieved. Except those corporate women. You're like, nothing you're saying about yourself makes any sense. They're like, I know. Thank you. Or it can be me. This is the other thing. I'm totally up for, I will be the person who, so this is another thing that makes, I always wonder if I'm a narcissist when people ask me. So people are like, how long have you been in Eugene? And I say 6 years. And they say, why did you move here? And I say, I don't know. And then a lot of times they'll laugh, or they're like, they're suddenly very interested. And I'm like, is this like a line? But I'm like, I actually don't know. Like I can walk you through, because you're not asking me like literally what were you thinking when you signed a lease in Eugene, Oregon on a house, sight unseen when you'd never been there. That's not what you're asking me. You're asking me, what's your narrative about why you moved here. What is your completed, sealed, safe story that you tell yourself about why you're here? I don't have one. I don't know. I don't know why I'm here, especially now that Shayla and I broke up. I don't even know why I'm still here. I don't know what I'm doing. So people do find me interesting, but they find it uncomfortable. So then I'm like, okay, we can't question your self-story, and we can't question my self-story. So what are we doing? We're just exchanging, so we're just smelling it? Is it just purely physiological comfort of being around other humans? We're just apes, we just smell each other. So then I was thinking, maybe this is just like death denial. Things happen, and sometimes they're good, usually they're bad. And so then are other people just wanting to create a sealed social environment where it doesn't seem like things happen? Everything, we're all, what about AI? It's like I met an accountant, and I'm like, so AI, right? And she was like, well, we'll always need human accountants. Okay, then I met a woman. I felt bad about this one. I met a woman whose partner is a healthcare provider, who I happen to have been to. She mentioned the clinic, and I was like, oh, I was there a few months ago. And then she was like, oh, did you see like this guy? And she, oh yeah, you go ahead. She was like, oh yeah, did you see this guy? I'm not trying to be like quiet or anything.
Oh, you're good?
Yeah, it's fine. She gave a description of her boyfriend. And I remembered him because he established a rapport with me very quickly. He was like very, I only saw him for like 10 minutes, but he was like very open about his thought process and why he was deciding what he would decide in a way that most doctors aren't, that I found engaging and, kind of nice, but very friendly and warm. Then she told me that he received a complaint, a college-age female who came in complaining about ear pain. And when he went to examine her ear, he brushed her hair back behind her ear before looking at it. She said that this gesture made her uncomfortable. And she's telling the story like, can you believe, like, nowadays that somebody would complain of, kids, Gen Z, oh my God. And I said, I think that's a reasonable complaint. And she was like, but he wasn't doing it in like a sexual way. And I said, well, it's an erogenous zone. There's no medical reason to brush someone's hair behind their ear. So she was just like, she got like really upset. And again, it's like, why are you uncomfortable? This isn't even a next level thing where the person has a story about themselves that they don't believe. So they tell you something that they don't think is true about themselves and then get mad if you don't agree with it. And then there's another guy who told me, said he was on a plane with his son. His son was like 10 years old at the time. He's on a plane with his son, and his son's kicking the seat in front of him. The guy puts his son in a headlock, and he gets a complaint for doing this. And he's like, can you believe it? Like, again, with the like, what's the world coming to? And I said, I think putting a 10-year-old kid in a headlock is child abuse. And he was like, you weren't there. And I was like, it doesn't matter what else happened. He's like, you didn't see what led up to it. And I was like, it doesn't matter what led up to it. Putting your son in a headlock is child abuse. And he was like, well, it wasn't violent. And I said, if you put me in a headlock right now, would that not be violent? Like, what are you talking about? It is violent. And he's like looking at me like upset with me. And I was like, listen, I'm not trying to go out of my way to like criticize you or make you feel bad. I'm just not going to agree with your story about how putting a 10-year-old in a headlock isn't child abuse. That is child abuse. And this does kind of tie into the gender thing. People are saying that I don't have empathy for trans people because of the logic of gender identity lecture, where I'm saying like, this doesn't make sense, that doesn't make sense. Where empathy is seen as softness and gentleness, and then that bleeds into just agreement with what other people say about themselves, and even when it's by implication also about you or just about reality. Trans people are very high in this quality of like, I'm telling you a story about myself, and if you don't agree with it, I'm gonna freak out. to the point where everyone in this city is afraid to talk about it. So then us having coffee with a black woman who is considering renting me a room in her house. It's not why we were having coffee. We were like kind of friends. But she mentioned, she was like, oh, I have a room, because I was looking for a new place. And then I told her about my gender stuff, the big gender audit, the logical audit. She was like, you're going to get my house firebombed. And I said, well, that's just it. That's why we have to do it. You know, you see that fear that you have. Everybody has this fear. And she said, well, you're free to talk about it. You're not afraid to talk about it because you're a white male. You have white male privilege. And I was like, well, I don't really identify as white, first of all. And second of all, a lot of people think I'm a pedophile. And I understand. She was like, I've gotten death threats related to my race. And I was like, I'm not trying to say that like it's like, I understand that everything bad people think about me is my fault. I get that. You know, I don't think I'm gonna give them that much. I don't think that's true. I think people are stupid and boring. Then she called me a narcissist. She said, this is a red flag. This is narcissistic behavior. I told you something about myself, and then you made it about yourself. Then she said, I'm not feeling comfortable with this relationship. And I said, I can see that. And she said, I think you have a lot to work on. And I said, I think you have a lot to work on. And she was like, and then just stood up and walked out of the coffee shop. So even when it's a zero-sum game, I'm saying something about myself and my experience and my body that is also something about your experience in your body and yourself and your interpretation of how people relate to you or see you. You have to agree with both, or you're oppressing me, or you are a narcissist if you don't agree with everything I say about myself. You're all the fucking narcissists.